The street stood across a gritty, dust-blown renovation site where the air feels heavy with the scent of hot iron and gasoline. Liam Jean stands like a monolith in a sea of movement, his tailored suit a sharp contrast to the decaying brickwork behind him. Suddenly, the silence of his presence is shattered by the frantic patter of small sneakers on pavement. Sir, please wait." Liam's enforcers, Valen and Kalo, move with instinctive, predatory precision to intercept, but Liam raises a single, tattooed hand. He stops. He turns. Benny stood there, chest heaving, her braids slightly frayed from running. She doesn't look at the guards. She looks straight at Liam, her small hand trembling as she thrusts forward 2 crumpled, sweat-stained dollar bills. "I have $2. I saved it for my birthdays. It's all I have right now, but I can get more. Please." "You have to help my mom. She gets bullied every day. They say they're going to take our house, and she cries when she thinks I'm asleep. Is $2 enough to make them stop?" The camera lingers on Liam's face. There is no mockery, no smile, just a terrifyingly long silence as he looks from the money to the child's eyes. Behind Benny, Clara appears at the edge of the sidewalk, her face pale, her hand over her mouth, caught in the agonizing realization that her daughter has just tried to hire the most dangerous man in the city. What do you think will happen next? Sit tight as we find out, because sometimes help comes in ways and places we never dream of. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comment, so I can send you special hugs and regards for being part of the family. Also, hit the subscribe button to subscribe. Now let's dive deep into the story. The neighborhood of Oakhaven didn't scream, it whimpered. It was the sound of plywood being nailed over windows and the low, persistent hum of developers' engines. Clara felt that whimper in her chest every time the consultants, men in cheap ties with predatory smiles, knocked on her door to remind her that her lease was a relic of a dying era. On this Tuesday, the air was particularly thick. Clara stood on her porch, her knuckles white as she held a notice of structural noncompliance. The man delivering it, a local opportunist named Mather, leaned too close, his breath smelling of stale coffee. "It's just business, Clara," Mather sneered, his hand lingering on the doorframe. "Move out now and you keep your dignity. Stay and, well, accidents happen in old buildings." Benny watched through the screen door. She saw the way her mother's shoulders dropped, a slow, agonizing collapse of spirit. Benny didn't understand property law, but she understood the look of a predator. And she knew that the men in the black SUVs who parked near the old shipyard didn't look like Mather. They looked like lions. When Liam Jean stepped out of his car that afternoon, the entire street seemed to hold its breath. He wasn't loud. He didn't yell commands. He simply stood there, checking a watch that probably cost more than Clara's house. Benny didn't hesitate. She grabbed the $2 she had hidden in a hollowed-out book and ran. The encounter was a snapshot of pure tension. Valen, the bald guard, looked ready to snap a neck. Kalo, the second guard, looked merely bored. But Liam looked curious. When Benny offered the money, the world stopped. $2, Liam's voice was a low, melodic rasp. He took the bills, the ink on his neck shifting as he tilted his head. "That is a significant investment, little one." Clara reached them then, her breath coming in jagged gasps. "Benny, no, I'm so sorry, sir. She's just a child, she doesn't know. Please take her, let us go." Liam didn't look at Clara. He folded the $2 with surgical precision and tucked them into his breast pocket, right over his heart. "The contract is signed," Liam said softly, finally meeting Clara's terrified gaze. "I expect my clients to be treated with respect. Go home, Clara. I'll be by to inspect the property tomorrow." He didn't wait for a response. He climbed back into the black abyss of his car, leaving Clara standing on the sidewalk, realizing that she had traded a group of bullies for a ghost she couldn't outrun. The following morning was the quietest Clara had ever known. Usually, the street was a cacophony of construction whistles and the consultants circling like vultures. Today, there was only the wind. At exactly 10:00 a.m., a single car pulled up. Not a fleet, just Liam and Kalo. Clara had spent the night cleaning, a nervous habit that left her hands raw. When the knock came, she opened the door to find Liam standing there, his hands behind his back. He wasn't wearing the suit jacket today, only a crisp white shirt with sleeves rolled up, revealing the dark, intricate maps of ink that claimed his forearms. "You can't be here," Clara whispered, her voice cracking. "People are talking, they think I'm involved with you." "Are you?" Liam asked, stepping past her without invitation. He didn't look at the furniture or the chipped paint. He looked at the photographs on the mantel. "The gossip of the fearful is of no consequence to me." He spent an hour in the house. He didn't check the plumbing or the wiring. He sat at the kitchen table while Benny showed him her school drawings. The tension in the room was a physical weight. Clara stood by the sink, clutching a dish towel, waiting for the ask. In her world, nothing was free. Men like Liam didn't protect people for $2. "What is the real price?" she finally blurted out, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. "Is it the house? Do you want the deed? Or is it something worse?" Liam looked up from Benny's drawing of a purple sun. For the first time, the predatory mask slipped, revealing a profound, hollow exhaustion. "Your daughter didn't ask me to save the house, Clara," he said, his voice devoid of its usual coldness. "She asked me to make the crying stop. I am a man of my word. If you wish to pay more than the $2 already provided, then provide me with a cup of tea. It's been a long time since I sat in a room that didn't smell like gunpowder." As if on cue, Mather, the bully from the day before, pulled into the driveway, ready to resume his harassment. He got as far as the porch steps before he saw Kalo leaning against the railing, cleaning his fingernails with a pocket knife. Mather didn't even speak. He turned around, tripped over his own feet, and drove away so fast he left tire marks. Clara watched him go, then looked back at Liam. He was calmly sipping the tea she hadn't even realized she had started pouring. She realized then that the monster wasn't just guarding her door, he was sitting at her table. By the end of the week, the neighborhood had transformed. It wasn't that the problems had vanished. It was that the power dynamic had shifted in a way that left everyone off balance. Liam didn't come inside every day. Instead, he began a ritual. Every evening at dusk, his car would park at the end of the block. He would get out, walk to Clara's porch, and stand there for exactly 20 minutes. Sometimes he spoke to Benny about her day. Sometimes he just stood in silence, a sentinel in the fading light. The psychological pressure was no longer coming from the developers. It was coming from the mystery of Liam's presence. The neighbors who used to shun Clara now watched her with a mixture of awe and terror. "You're playing with fire, Clara," her neighbor, a woman named Leora, whispered over the fence one afternoon. "That man, he doesn't have friends, he has assets. Which one are you?" That question haunted Clara. That night, when Liam arrived for his 20 minutes, she met him on the porch before he could even reach the top step. "You have to stop," she said, her voice low. "The bullying has stopped, but the fear has just changed shape. Everyone is waiting for the other shoe to drop. They're waiting for you to burn this place down or take me away." Liam leaned against the porch pillar. The streetlights flickered on, casting long, jagged shadows across his face. "I have spent my life making people afraid, Clara," he said quietly. "It is a very easy thing to do. It takes no effort to destroy, but your daughter—" She looked at me and didn't see a fire. She saw a wall. "For the first time in 20 years, I am being used for something other than ruin." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden bird, a hand-carved trinket. Benny mentioned she liked the birds in the park. He set it on the railing. "I am not here to take your house, and I am not here to take you," he continued, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath hitch. "I am here because for 20 minutes a day, I am just a man standing on a porch and not a ghost in a suit. That is worth much more than $2. Clara reached out, her fingers brushing the wooden bird. For the first time, she didn't feel the urge to pull away. The tension remained, but it had changed. It wasn't the tension of a victim and a predator. It was the tension of two people realizing they were both profoundly alone. The silence in Oakhaven was no longer peaceful. It was heavy. It was the kind of silence that preceded a storm. While the physical threats against Clara had vanished, a new, more insidious pressure began to mount. It started with the grocery store, the way the cashier wouldn't meet Clara's eyes, or how the local mothers pulled their children a few inches closer when Benny skipped past them on the sidewalk. Clara felt the isolation like a physical coldness. She sat in her living room, the wooden bird Liam had gifted Benny sitting on the coffee table. It was a beautiful piece of craftsmanship, but to Clara, it felt like a tracking device, a constant reminder that her life was no longer her own. That afternoon, a different kind of visitor arrived. It wasn't the consultants, but a group of community elders led by a man named Barris, a retired deacon who had lived on the block for 40 years. He didn't come with threats, but with a somber, heavy concern that felt far more damaging. "Clara," Barris said, standing on the porch where Liam had stood only hours before. "We know what you're trying to do. We know you're trying to protect your girl, but you've invited a wolf into the sheepfold. The men who were bothering you, they were greedy. But the man you've brought here, he's something else entirely. He's the reason the police don't come to this ward. He's the reason families disappear." Clara gripped the doorframe. "He hasn't touched a soul, Barris. He's been kind." "Kindness from a man like Liam Jean is a loan with an interest rate you can't afford," Barris replied. "The neighborhood is scared, Clara, not of the developers anymore. They're scared that when his enemies come for him, and they will come, they'll find him here, on our street, next to our children." The weight of his words stayed with her long after he left. When Liam's car pulled up that evening, the usual sense of relief Clara felt was replaced by a sharp, biting anxiety. She watched him walk up the path, his silhouette dark against the orange sunset. "You're late," she said, her voice tight. Liam paused, his foot on the first step. He sensed the shift in the air immediately. He didn't move closer. "The docks required my attention. Is something wrong?" "Everything is wrong, Liam," Clara said, stepping out onto the porch. She felt the eyes of the neighbors behind their curtains. "You're a shield, but you're also a target. My neighbors. They're terrified. They think you're going to bring a war to our front doors. I can't live like this. I can't have my daughter growing up in a fortress that's waiting to be attacked." Liam didn't defend himself. He didn't offer platitudes. He looked down at his hands, hands that had built an empire on the very fear Clara was describing. "They are right to be afraid," Liam said softly. The honesty was more painful than a lie would have been. "I am not a good man, Clara. I never claimed to be. I am simply a man who honors a contract. If my presence causes you more pain than the consultants did, then the contract is failing." He looked up, and for a fleeting second, the coldness in his eyes was replaced by a raw, human uncertainty. "Do you want me to leave?" Clara looked at the empty street, then back at the man who had stood his ground when no one else would. The conflict tore at her. If he stayed, she was an outcast. If he left, the wolves would return by morning. "I don't know," she whispered. "I just want to be safe without being feared." Liam nodded slowly. He didn't stay for his 20 minutes that night. He turned and walked back to his car, leaving the wooden bird on the railing, and a silence that felt louder than any shout. For 3 days, the black SUV didn't appear. At first, Clara felt a surge of autonomy. She walked to the store with her head high. She waved at Barris. She tried to reclaim the rhythm of her old life. But the consultants were like mold. You could scrub the surface, but the spores remained. By the second day, Mather was parked across the street again, leaning against his sedan, ostentatiously checking his clipboard and smirking at Clara as she walked Benny to school. The bullying didn't return as a roar, but as a whisper. A final notice taped to the door, a mysterious rock thrown through a basement window. The message was clear. The lion was gone, and the hyenas were hungry. Inside the house, Benny was inconsolable. It wasn't about the protection, it was about the man. "Did I do something wrong, Mommy?" Benny asked, sitting at the kitchen table, her $2, which Liam had somehow slipped back into her pocket the night he left, sitting in front of her. "Did he not like my drawings?" "No, baby," Clara said, her heart breaking. "He's just a very busy man." "He kept his word," Benny whispered. "He didn't cry, he made them go away." Clara realized then that Benny hadn't just seen a solution in Liam. She had seen a consistency that was rare in their world. Liam was the only thing in Benny's life that hadn't wavered, hadn't flinched, and hadn't lied. That night, Clara did something she thought she would never do. She walked down to the shipyard. The area was a labyrinth of shipping containers and industrial skeletons. She felt the eyes of Liam's lookouts before she saw them. 2 men stepped out of the shadows, not Valen or Kalo, but younger, hungrier-looking men. "I need to see Liam," Clara said, her voice steadier than she felt. "The boss doesn't take walk-ins. One of the men laughed. "Go home, lady." "Tell him his client is here to renegotiate," Clara snapped. 10 minutes later, she was ushered into a small, sparsely furnished office inside a converted warehouse. Liam was sitting behind a desk, surrounded by monitors and ledgers. He looked different here, colder, sharper, like a blade that had been unsheathed. "You shouldn't be here, Clara," he said, not looking up from his work. "This place is not for you." "You left the bird," she said, placing the wooden carving on his desk. Liam finally looked up. It was a gift for the child, not a debt for the mother. "I was wrong," Clara said, the words tasting like ash. "I thought I could handle the consultants on my own. I thought I could go back, but they're already back, Liam. Mather is at my door again." "And what do you expect me to do?" Liam asked, his voice devoid of emotion. "I am a target, remember? My presence is a war waiting to happen." "I want you to teach me," Clara said. Liam froze. "Teach you what?" "How to look at them the way you do," Clara said, stepping closer to the desk. "How to make them realize that I am not an asset or a relic. You can't stay on my porch forever, and I can't live in your shadow. Help me stand my own ground. That's the new contract. I'll pay you another $2. Liam stared at her for a long time. The tension in the room shifted from the threat of violence to the threat of intimacy. He saw the fire in her, the same fire he had spent decades trying to extinguish in himself. $2 is a steep price for such a lesson," Liam said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "It will be difficult. It will be lonely. Are you sure?" "I've been lonely my whole life," Clara said. "I might as well be powerful while I'm at it." The lessons didn't involve weapons. There were no shooting ranges or martial arts montages. Instead, Liam began to show Clara the architecture of power, how it was built on information, composure, and the refusal to be moved. He would come to the house, but instead of standing on the porch, he sat with Clara and reviewed the legal documents the developers were using. He showed her the loopholes, the names of the silent partners, and the pressure points of the men trying to ruin her. "Power isn't the gun," Liam told her one evening as they pored over a stack of property records. "The gun is what you use when you've already lost the argument. Power is knowing the man across from you is lying and letting him know that you know, without saying a word." Benny would sit nearby, watching them. The dynamic had changed. Liam was no longer a sentinel, he was a mentor. And as he taught Clara, something strange happened. Clara began to teach him. She taught him about the neighborhood, the history of the families, the way the sunlight hit the oak trees in the morning, the small, quiet triumphs of people who had nothing but each other. She showed him that the assets he saw were actually lives. "You see a map of territory," Clara said, pointing to his tablet. "I see the place where Mrs. Gable taught me how to bake. You can't protect a place if you don't understand what makes it worth saving." Liam listened with a gravity that was unnerving. He was a man who had spent his life looking for value, and he was realizing he had missed the most valuable thing of all, belonging. The psychological pressure in the neighborhood began to tilt again. This time, it wasn't fear of Liam, it was confusion. The neighbors saw Clara standing taller. They saw her confronting Mather on the sidewalk, not with screams, but with a folder of evidence and a calm, terrifyingly steady gaze that mirrored Liam's own. Mather was rattled. He didn't understand this new version of Clara. She wasn't a victim anymore, she was a chess player. But as Clara grew stronger, the danger grew more real. Liam's rivals, men who had been watching his distraction in Oakhaven, saw his frequent visits as a weakness. They didn't see a man protecting a child. They saw a king who had stepped off his throne and into a vulnerable domestic sphere. One evening, as Liam was leaving, Valen pulled him aside. "The Ura Syndicate is asking questions, boss," Valen whispered, his eyes scanning the rooftops. "They think you've gone soft on this block. They think the woman is your leverage. We need to end this. We need to pull back before they decide to make a move on this house just to see you bleed." Liam looked up at the window where Benny was waving goodbye. He felt the cold weight of his world pressing in on the fragile peace he had found. "If they touch this house," Liam said, his voice a low, vibrating growl that made even Valen flinch, "they won't just see me bleed. They'll see the city burn. Prepare the perimeter. We aren't pulling back. We're digging in." The uncomfortable alliance, was about to face its first true test of fire, and Clara was about to find out if she was truly ready to stand her ground. The atmosphere in Oakhaven shifted from a simmer to a cold, biting frost. The Ura Syndicate didn't move with the clumsy greed of developers. They moved with the precision of a scalpel. They began by cutting the threads around the house. The phone lines were severed, the streetlights on the block were smashed, and a heavy, suffocating silence settled over the neighborhood. Liam remained in the house now. He didn't hide, but he sat in the shadows of the living room, his presence a dark anchor. Valen and Kalo were no longer leaning casually against cars. They were stationed at the perimeter, eyes scanning the dark with a lethal intensity. "You should take Benny and go to the safe house," Liam said, his voice barely a whisper in the dark kitchen. "No," Clara replied, her voice steady as she poured a glass of water. "This is what you taught me, isn't it? To stand my ground. If I leave now, I lose the house, the neighborhood, and the dignity I've fought for. If I run, I'm just a victim again." Liam looked at her, his silhouette sharp against the moonlight. "There is a difference between standing your ground and standing in a graveyard, Clara. These men. They aren't consultants. They don't care about deeds or laws." "And you?" Clara asked, stepping closer. "What do you care about, Liam?" The question hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. For months, they had danced around the reality of their connection. It wasn't a romance, it was a recognition. Two people who had been hardened by the world, finding a strange, jagged comfort in each other's strength. "I care about the contract," Liam said, but the lie was thin. Before she could respond, a low rumble vibrated through the floorboards. A black sedan, lights extinguished, crawled down the street. It stopped directly in front of the house. Liam stood, his hand instinctively reaching for the hidden holster beneath his shirt, but he paused. He looked at Benny, who was asleep on the sofa, clutching the wooden bird. He looked at Clara. For the first time, the Mafia boss looked afraid, not of death, but of the ruin his world was about to bring into this sanctuary. "Get in the basement," Liam commanded. "Now." "Only if you promise that when this is over, you don't disappear," Clara challenged. Liam didn't answer. He simply pointed toward the stairs. As the first window shattered in the back of the house, Clara grabbed Benny and descended into the dark, realizing that the $2 contract was about to be paid in blood. The conflict wasn't a cinematic explosion of gunfire, it was a psychological siege. The Ura enforcers didn't storm the house. They waited. They circled. They sent a message by torching Mather's car 2 blocks away, a warning that the old bullies were nothing compared to the new ones. Inside, Liam moved with a terrifying, ghostly grace. He didn't fire a single shot. Instead, he used the darkness of the house he had come to know so well. He knew which floorboards creaked. He knew how the shadows pooled in the corners. When the back door was kicked in, Liam didn't meet them with a frontal assault. He was a shadow among shadows. One by one, the intruders were neutralized, not with the intent to kill, but with a clinical, efficient brutality that sent a clearer message. You are outmatched in a house protected by love. From the basement, Clara heard the muffled thuds and the sharp intake of breaths. She held Benny close, whispering stories of the neighborhood's history to drown out the sounds above. She realized that Liam was fighting for the very thing she had taught him, the value of a home. An hour later, the silence returned. It was a different kind of quiet, the quiet of a victor. The basement door creaked open. Liam stood there, his white shirt stained with dust and a single streak of dark crimson on his cheek. He looked exhausted, his predatory mask shattered. "It's over," he said. "They won't come back. I've made sure the Ura understand that this block is sovereign territory." Clara stood up, her legs shaking but her gaze firm. She walked over to him and did something that surprised them both. She reached up and wiped the blood from his cheek with her thumb. "You're hurt," she whispered. "I'm alive," he countered. "Because of a child's $2. "No," Liam said, his voice cracking for the first time. "Because for the first time in my life, I had something to come back to." The stakes had shifted. The physical battle was won, but the social consequence remained. The neighborhood had seen the violence. They had seen the true face of Liam's world. The final test wasn't surviving the Ura, it was surviving the peace. 6 months later, Oakhaven didn't look like a war zone. It looked like a community. The developers had moved on, their redevelopment plans thwarted by a series of anonymous legal filings and a sudden, inexplicable lack of local cooperation. The consultants were gone, replaced by a neighborhood watch that actually watched. Clara stood on her porch, which had been freshly painted. She wasn't a victim, and she wasn't a mafia consort. She was the woman who had stood her ground. She now ran a local advocacy group, teaching other families how to read the fine print of the world. Liam's black SUV still pulled up at dusk, but it was different now. He didn't stay for 20 minutes of silence. He stayed for dinner. He was still the boss. He still had the ink on his neck and the weight of a dark empire on his shoulders. But in Oakhaven, he was just Mr. Liam. He had funded the repair of the park and the new streetlights, not as a savior, but as a resident. Benny ran down the steps to meet him, holding a new drawing. This one wasn't of a purple sun. It was a portrait of a man, a woman, and a little girl standing in front of a house with a solid, unshakable foundation. "Is the contract still good?" Benny asked, looking up at him with the same fearless eyes she had 6 months ago. Liam reached into his pocket and pulled out the original, crumpled $2, now encased in a small, protective plastic sleeve. "The contract is for life, Benny," Liam said, looking over her head at Clara, who was leaning against the doorframe, smiling. The story didn't end with a wedding or a dramatic exit into the sunset. It ended with a quiet, hard-won unity. They were an unlikely family, a woman who found her power, a man who found his soul, and a child who knew that hope was worth exactly $2. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the neighborhood was finally quiet. Not the silence of fear, but the deep, resonant peace of a place that finally knew it was home. End of the story.